purpose of this space is to create a very safe environment for people to share a moment of their lives. Thank you for coming. For those of you that don't know who I am Winston Young. I am your host for tonight. And I was given back this mic that I handed out last October. And then pieces fell together to create this show that you are at right now. To give you a bit of insight as to what the show is about, I grew up with a massive dysfunctional belief that I needed permission to speak. And it kind of looked like this. Someone would be sitting there and you just stand very attentively waiting for your moment, and they would be annoyed that you're standing there waiting for a moment. You get your moment, and then they just sit back and said, okay, so know that you've been waiting, so talk. And I'm sure you would understand at that moment, in your mind, you're like, well, you're not really listening to what I have to say. And then you don't say it. And then that little voice that you have just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and disappears. And then you grow into an adult, and then you want your voice to be heard, and you severely overcompensate. And I overcompensated in the way of wanting to be that guy that everyone shot in a photograph, wanted to be. It's like you wanted that superstardom. And I didn't understand I actually achieved that until someone came up to me and said, Winston, why do you always need to be photographed with whomever that may be? To me, that was just normal until I finally started doing some personal development work and realized that all that was born from this belief that I needed permission to speak and that no one was listening. And if they wanted to listen, no one really cared. So I just kept that message inside of me. So the purpose of this space is to create a very safe environment for people to share a moment of their lives. There's no theme involved. The people that come up here have selected a story on their own, and they're going to share it with us to connect your heart to their heart, to create a connection and to create community within this space, and then have it grow as the shows go on.
Open 7 days a week, located at the south end of the Pattullo Bridge at 12375 King George Boulevard in Surrey.
Foodie World has 75,000 square feet of imported and domestic products, with a large selection dedicated to our Filipino kababayans. With an in-house butcher, variety of seafood, and produce from around the globe. Open every day until midnight. Foodie World, 1 block east of Number 3 Road off Sea Island Way in Richmond.
There is photography and video recording allowed, but I do ask that you refrain from doing it for the sole purpose that these people coming on stage are freaked out enough and they don't need a camera recording them as they move around. And if you do take a picture, please turn off the flash so you don't distract them and they lose their train of thought. The second thing is a trigger warning. All of the stories are personal in nature, and some of them might encroach on very dark topics of abuse, addiction, self-harm, things that might trigger you. So if you get triggered and you need a timeout, there's a beautiful lounge at the back and around the corner. You can go there, give yourself a timeout. Okay, so I'm going to put this hat on. So give me a second to put this hat on, and we'll get the show started. Okay. Yeah, now we can get going. I grew up in a world where well, it, well, to be blunt, it was racist, and I didn't have a support network. I was one of 4 Asian kids in the high school, and to constantly walk into a room and have people say, "What are you doing in here? You don't belong in here. What are you sitting in the front of the class for? Just go away. Just go hide. You don't deserve to be here." Growing up in that type of environment, it wears on you. But if you don't have any way of letting it out, you start believing that this is true. You start believing that this is how life is. And so it became that way. You grow up, you get used to it, you build up a thicker skin. But in the back of my mind, it never went away. And as I look back now on my glorious life and just see how twisted and demented I truly became, it took a lot of work to undo all that work. But by doing so, it took one moment in my life, and that secret day was May 3rd, 2013. It was a Friday where I looked at myself in the mirror after a serious bender and told myself, if I didn't change my way, I'll be dead within the next 5 years. Death is a massive motivator, as you can imagine, but it took a hell of a lot of courage for me to go up and make a phone call to someone that I hardly knew to hold me accountable. And I said, I need help, I need out, and I have no one to turn to. And he said, sure. And I, to this day, don't believe he said yes. But he did, and everything changed. So in that one moment, and I'm sure you've all felt this, in that one little moment where you sit there and you're like, I don't know, and you want to puke because you're so afraid of asking for that help. But for that heartbeat moment of courage, your whole life can change. A few years ago, I had a very big disillusion with Vancouver as a single guy working his ass off, trying to go on a date. You would walk down the street, say hi to someone, and you get the iciest cold stare that could basically turn the rain into the snow in Toronto. And I go, what did I do? I just said hi. And it happened all over the place. And I'm thinking, is it me? It can't be me. I go, maybe I'm like 5 pounds overweight, but it can't be me that I'm that bad. So I was so disillusioned that I actually left and decided, you know what, I'm just gonna go to another part of the world and see if the rest of the world is like this. So I had no set plans, and I flew to Europe, landed in London, and after I recovered from jet lag, I remember I went out and I said hi. I said hi to the first lady I saw, and she gave me this really weird look, and then I realized I had this hat on. But then she actually stopped and smiled back and said hi and kept going. I'm going, okay. I took the hat off, and we'll try this experiment again. It was much different over there. And then as I went to different countries, I realized that it wasn't, the world's not like this. The world isn't this bitter place that everyone's just in their own little bubble and they don't care about anyone but themselves. But I realized that I was working my ass off up until that point in time for status and fame and money, so I could be somebody in a paper-thin world of people that have no substance. And then I realized, even what was more shocking, was how much time it took me to figure that out. And then I go, wow, maybe I should have done it 10 years earlier when I had more time and energy. And then really got me thinking as to what I'm doing with this time that I have in my life. What is purposeful, what is not. My favorite decision-making process that I remind myself is I came back from the US one day and I decided to turn right and go visit my sister. And back then, I was still an asshole and a narcissist and, not nearly the wonderful person that I am now. And she goes, you know what, before you go, you have to go read your 2 nephews a story. I'm like, okay, whatever, how hard could this be, right? So I gave me the book, I read them the story, put them to bed. And I felt this feeling that I've never felt before. And she said, that's called happiness. I'm like, oh, great. I guess it's been a while since I felt this. And she goes, you do know that you can always choose to turn right and not left and go back to work. And back then, it made no sense to me at all. It's like, what else is there except work, making money, and spending the money that you just worked at? And you take all this time and I put a price tag on every second of my life and increase that price tag, and then only recently understood that there's an end date to this price tag. And I invite Jivi Saran up to explain what that truly means.
Heritage Education Funds is one of Canada's RESP providers. They've worked with 500,000 Canadian citizens towards achieving their post-secondary education. Contact Heritage Education Funds at 604-327-1411.
Surrey Honda features a large selection of previously owned vehicles. Finance and lease rates are available 7 days a week. The parts and service department is only closed Sundays, and there's multilingual staff on site. At Surrey Honda, 15291 Fraser Highway, 1 block east of 152nd. Foodie World presents Philippine Street, featuring a large selection of Filipino foods. From imported non-perishable products to both packaged seafood and locally caught and very much alive. Foodie World is 75,000 square feet of worldly groceries situated in North Richmond.
Far West Financial and Insurance Agency, offering life, health, and critical illness insurance which covers cancer, heart attacks, and strokes. Please call Leo D for more information.
Open 7 days a week, Kingsgate Mall features shops for both men's and women's clothing, women's fashions and accessories, and footwear for everyone, prescription glasses and contact lenses, as well as shopping for his and her jewelry. Kingsgate Mall on East Broadway at Kingsway.
Death is the only universal truth. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes for just a matter of a few seconds. And as you close your eyes, I want you to connect with the breath that's incoming and the breath that's outgoing. That happens involuntarily. Could you imagine if we were responsible for our incoming and outgoing breath and we forgot? I also want you in this moment to recognize that as you take your incoming breath, there is a possibility the outgoing breath will not occur. As your outgoing breath happens, I want you to think about there's a possibility the incoming breath will not occur. So with that, I'll invite you to open your eyes again. A few years back, about 7 or 8 years ago, I was in a really miserable place. Everything sucked externally to me, but me. My career sucked, my relationship sucked, and everybody else was to blame but me. I started this journey called the Hero's Journey. Quite a fascinating journey. Each and every one of us go through this calling of there's got to be something better out there. This is not it. I feel an emptiness in my heart and there's something out there that's going to fill it. And I started to look for what that was. Conferences, workshops, traveled around the world to ashrams. Everywhere somebody told me the answer might be, that's where I was. And as this hero's journey began, I started to realize that, wait a minute, and I don't know how many of you know about the hero's journey, but there's a place at which There's a calling in your life and you want to do something different. You may not want to know what it is. And then you go down this slippery slope of all of the challenges and obstacles that are going to happen. So what did I do? Left my job, left my marriage, left everything, moved across the ocean to the island because I thought that's where the answer was. Because I needed to drop everything. So as I went down this hero's journey, there's a pit in this hero's journey. And when you're sitting in that caca, yucky place of, oh my gosh, what have I done? Maybe I should have stayed in that relationship. Maybe I should have stayed working there. All of the shoulds, the coulds, the woulds start popping up in that pit of despair on that hero's journey. So that's what happened with me. I started to question all the choices that I had made. All the choices I had made against culture, society, religion, all of that. I had broken so many norms that in the pit of despair, I was like, I've done massively wrong things here. The beauty of the hero's journey is that at some point, your social allies start to change, so you start to recognize that maybe the choices I've made are the right ones for me. And that's what happened. My social allies started to change. More and more beautiful people came into my life as I started to look for what was within me. The beauty of stepping outside the hero's journey is you come out with this beautiful elixir. And that elixir is what's true to you and what's true to your heart. It's almost like a medication you carry out of this hero's journey. And I could stand here and I could tell you stories and stories about this hero's journey. Everything that I thought were miserable things that were happening in my life, and yet they weren't. My grandfather was an amazing storyteller. And one of the stories he used to tell when we were little was that each and every individual person is like a vehicle. And your body in this vehicle goes down the road. And as you journey down this road, you're going to come across hospitals and cemeteries and storms and parks. And at that time, I was, oh my God, he's annoying us again. Here goes another story. Because that's where they were. He taught within those stories. It wasn't until I started to walk that hero's journey that I started to recognize that I was searching for happiness. And I had to take a step back and think, wow, this is a part of the journey that my grandfather talked about. Happiness is only one part of that journey. I have to learn to exist within that pathway in that journey, where happiness will come, sadness will come, death will occur, birth will occur. There's so many things that occur as you travel down that pathway. So here's the elixir that I ended up walking out with. The elixir was that my physical body has an expiry date that's invisible, that's stamped on. And that invisible expiry date is totally connected to my incoming and my outgoing breath. That there's a possibility, like seriously, the magnitude of understanding just that one thing, that next breath, incoming or outgoing, is not a given for you. It's not a given for me. So how was I going to choose to live, recognizing that expiry date, that invisible expiry date existed on my physical body? And that shifted the way I looked at relationships. It shifted the way, horrible things were happening in my life, good things were happening. There was almost a neutrality, like a neutral being within that place. Things would happen, I would still get sad, I would still get angry, I would still get happy, but it wouldn't last because I knew as that vehicle continued down that road, things were going to shift. What was true today was not going to be true tomorrow. As long as I kept that invisible expiry date that stamped onto my body forefront, I could recognize the choices and decisions I was making in my life. And none of them were right or wrong. They just were. So I would process things from the past, like things would come up from boarding school, things would come up from the divorce, things would come up from an arranged marriage. But all of a sudden, it was a different view of how I looked at them. They were experiences that happened in that moment. And if I chose to sit there in that memory bank, I was going to cry, I was going to get upset, I was going to get angry, and all of those emotions that actually don't even exist in the reality of that moment were going to come up. I'm not in boarding school anymore. I'm not going through my divorce anymore. I'm not in my arranged marriage. Yet, in that moment in time, how many years later, I was still reliving all of those. So when you keep that breath in mind, when you keep that expiry date in mind, it shifts the way you view the world. I think as human beings, we're so busy thinking about transcending and ascending and connection to divine, all of them very beautiful things. But I think we're forgetting physical existence. Like, how do we exist as human beings? The other day I looked up the definition of humanity because I was quite intrigued. And the definition of humanity is a collective of humans. Is that it? Like, seriously, is that all we can get from a dictionary, is the collection of humans? So when I step back and I look at life differently, I'm looking at it from a physical existence. I'm done transcending and ascending and connecting to divine. I'm done. Now I want to know, how am I going to live here? Because what I've learned is that if divine was so set on me learning transcendence and ascension and all of that beautiful stuff, why would I be here? So here we are, and I'm in the place of now inviting everybody that physical existence is where I'm at. The elixir that I came out with, which is my invisible expiry date, that expiry date now fuels my physical existence. So as of January 1st, I've disconnected from all social media because I want to experience life differently. Not that social media was bad, but now it's time to actually get out there and be in that physical existence. It's time to get on a horse. It's time to go tubing in Whistler. It's time to do all of these beautiful things that require the courage, the accountability, and all of the beautiful things that the speakers before me have said. Because I think there's a thread that ties all of us. There's a thread that says, this is not good enough. And if it's not good enough, then what kind of a life do I want to live, knowing that one day I will not be here? And how much of the population will actually even remember that we were ever here? So I'll leave you with a quote. And the quote is that either one day I will write a book, or I'm going to live a life that somebody else writes about. So I invite you today to be one or the other. Thank you.
Jivi Saran. Her story of her journey to this point in time and her story of what perception means. Alison Donahue.
High school was not a good time for me. There are some people who want nothing more than to go back to high school. I am not one of those people. I learned an awful lot about life, and I learned a lot about me, but I'm not prepared to go back. When I was 14, I felt quite ostracized. I had moved from province to province. I was in a new school, and I never quite adapted to being in this new environment with people I didn't know. I felt like I had no friends, and I felt like I totally just didn't belong anywhere. And a girl that I went to school with said to me, hey, why don't you come to my youth group? We meet at our church on the weekend. And I said, wow, somebody wants to hang out with me. This is good. So I went, and there was this guy there. There's always a guy. And he was just so charismatic. Like, he had command of the entire room. Everybody just really was wanting to be around him, and it kind of helped that he was cute. And then he came over to talk to me. And I thought, oh my God, he's talking to me? And I had this warped sense of gratitude that I was somehow worthy because this guy was coming to talk to me. And so we talked all night, and he said to me, he said, well, do you want to go out on a date? And I'm like 14, he was like 17, he was already living on his own. And I'm like, yeah, I want to go on a date.
Open 7 days a week, located at the south end of the Pattullo Bridge at 12375 King George Boulevard in Surrey.
Located 1 block north of St. Paul's Hospital, Downtown Denture Center features complete and partial teeth restoration options. With 35 years experience, Anthony Chung offers mobile services and emergency repair consultation 24 hours a day. Downtown Denture Center, just off Nelson at 970 Burrard in the lobby of the Electra Building.
Welcome po sa Surrey Mitsubishi, Surrey's only Mitsubishi dealership. Marami kaming selection from all makes and models, and all trade-ins are welcome. Garantisado ang financing, plus meron kaming certified warranty technicians for all your services and repairs. Matatagpuan sa 104 and 138 and at surreymitsubishi.com.